And we're live. Welcome to Earful of Dirt, the Major League Rugby podcast. Thank you for joining us. Corey is out sick today, and I am taking over his place. In case you don't know me, I am Josh Fredlin. I will be hanging out in the comments. Aaron Castro's in Arizona. Liam Madigan-Freed has escaped the cold for the past month and is in Houston, Texas. So, guys, how was your week?
Well, I guess I got into grad school. Yeah, I got into grad school and started grad school basically in like a matter of like 3 days. There was an error at ASU that somehow they didn't process me being admitted into the school. So it was pretty close. I didn't get into all my classes until the middle of Thursday morning. I got into all. So there was a lecture I had to go to on professional sports law. So when it comes to sports law, getting a master's in sports law and business at Arizona State, it's gonna be a fun time. And of course, they offer a great lecture on Friday afternoons with Bud Selig, former Major League Baseball commissioner. So I am a baseball fan, and I took the sports law program so I could do some more stuff in this sport. So yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, my week was pretty good. But first, Aaron, I want to say that actually kind of sounds like hell, just because signing up for classes in undergrad is like a stressful enough, endeavor. So I can't even imagine with a fucking master's program what that must be like. But regardless, what I really do want to say in terms of how my week went, it was 74 degrees today, and it's January. My Boston mind cannot process this occurrence of nature.
Wait,
I don't like it.
74?
It was 74 degrees at practice today when I was at the Sabercats practice filming. I was wearing long pants and a long sleeve t-shirt because my brain just tells me to put on those clothes.
Even for East Texas, that's kind of warm for January.
I mean, but it's just not surprising though. Like by any.
It should be more. You should get some 50 and more rain. Should be well on the way.
Oh, there's been plenty of that. Just ask the people building Aviva Stadium.
That's fun.
But other than that, we should talk about that rugby game, right?
Rugby thing? Yeah, a lot of rugby happened this weekend. But let's just let you guys know, for those new and old. Each Monday night, we discuss news and rumors from Major League Rugby, the United States Professional Rugby Union competition. It's a chance to look at the issues, hear from the league, players, team leadership, and check in with our friends across the U.S. rugby scene. With that said, I guess, I'll keep talking. But the rundown for this week: Houston versus Austin, New Orleans versus the Dallas Reds, San Diego versus Glendale, Utah v. Life West, RUNY versus Toronto, which was canceled. USA Rugby versus Canterbury deal. Commentary to follow. But I wasn't at this game. However, in operative, in full view.
Yes. Well, I was there undercover as the almighty secret EOD agent, and I did have a couple of observations. Honestly, I was really hoping for more from Houston in this game. I went in, my prediction amongst some of my coworkers was 34-21 Houston victory. But honestly, throughout the game, they really just couldn't find a rhythm to really run away with this game. And there was actually a ton of chances. There were some key drops and a bunch of mental errors, particularly in the second half. We had 8 penalties called on the Houston Sabercats as opposed to only 3 called on the Austin Elite. And that really killed them in terms of keeping them in their own zone and giving Austin just multiple opportunities, especially in terms of putting the ball into the scrum. That was definitely killer. But Austin definitely needs their credit in terms of how they played as well. Their defense was working great. They were able to defend the post, and they were able to come up as a group. And they made life hell, not just for the backs of the Houston Sabercats, but for the scrum halves, Connor Murphy and Santiago Arata as well. As soon as they were legally allowed, it seemed like both Connor and Santiago were just getting smothered trying to get the ball out of the ruck, and it really, really made stuff difficult. But one of the draws for the Sabercats this year going in, just like last year, their scrum was far superior. Definitely the presence of newcomer Charlie Connolly is a plus. He's a tough Irish bastard, and he really, really knows how to react when adversity's thrown at him in the scrum. Now, not just Charlie, though. Jake Turnbull and Jamie Deaver, they deserve a whole bunch of credit. The Austin tighthead, Mason Peterson, great guy, great athlete. However, much of the game, he was trying to bore in just to throw off Pat O'Toole, the hooker for the Houston Sabercats. And luckily, Turnbull and Deaver, they were both experienced enough to know to switch to a long bind on the scrum. That way, they were able to, they kind of gave Mason an ultimatum, either break your neck or take the penalty for bringing down the scrum. And, you know, not too hard to tell which one that's going to be. You know, so the scrum, definitely a draw for Austin. Definitely a draw for Houston. One other plus for Houston, though, despite the sad result of 14-10, was their defense inside the 22. It was really stout, and it only yielded twice. One of the reasons they fell behind was a blocked box kick attempt by Santiago Arata. It gave Aidan McCullen, a really good opportunity just to scoop and score and get that try that just put them over the edge. Unfortunately, Sam Windsor did not have a good game kicking from the tee. He went 0 for 2 on conversions, which is why this game ended in a loss for Houston instead of a tie. So definitely a lot of pluses, but there's definitely a lot of things that Coach Fitzpatrick is going to want to work on after this game.
So, do you think that the Sabercats rose to the occasion with their defense to impress their newly arrived defense coach? Well,
I mean, if you're a player, you're going to be trying to impress the coaches regardless. However, I definitely got to give credit to Coach Neil Kelly. Since he's arrived, I've seen him going through drills in practice that I just hadn't seen previously. And honestly, the players seem to be responding well. There's a slightly higher degree of physicality, but as well, there's also more of a discipline to it. He really expects players to get it right through repetition. And I think that's really going to help the Sabercats this year in terms of finishing games, which we knew was a huge problem with them last year. Was they would get these leads, and sometimes they would even be pretty big leads, and they would just lose it going into the second half. It was just, it was a problem, and I think Neil Kelly is going to make that difference.
Yeah. So, one of the cool things here is that the Houston Sabercats will have 2 MLR on MLR clashes leading into the regular season, just closing out with Austin Elite. And this weekend, Kids Night at Constellation Field, 7 p.m. Saturday.
Versus the Glendale Raptors. And I believe me, they are taking this seriously. I just spent all day editing footage of the San Diego Legion versus the Glendale Raptors, which is a game that we're going to get to. But they're definitely people are asking, are there any streams of these games? Unfortunately not. The Houston Sabercats will not be shelling out the cash to have these games streamed. However, that just means you get to tune into my writing about the game and to this podcast where you can get some pretty exclusive views on what happened in those games. So all the more reason to watch Earful of Dirt and to read Liam Poach to obey.
That's one of the things to understand about the current television deal, as far as I understand. I don't know, but they are not televising preseason games, so it is on the individual teams to fund that endeavor. And you're seeing a variety of, I guess, styles when it comes to and wherewithal what people want to see. Gift for.
Gift at Gift Time Rugby Network. You are the MVP of streaming, man. We love you.
He's gotten everything done for New Orleans, so we've seen all of their stuff, and we're going to talk about his latest game on the Gift Time Rugby Network this weekend. Was the New Orleans Gold versus the Dallas Reds. Also, before this game, the U18s for New Orleans, on a 3-game winning streak. Lost to Memphis Intercity Rugby. There's a question that we're going to talk about at the end about academies and how they're aligned. Well, when it comes to competition, Nola's been getting it done this winter. I think all of those guys are going to go back to school, though. And, the academy will sort of just meet up for training, but fixtures is probably going to be few and far between at the moment until summer. And then you'll have a ton of that stuff going on, getting these guys out to tournaments, RCTs and everything. But about this game, I got a pretty strong opinion about playing clubs, especially in year 2. I sort of don't really want to see it, especially when you're depending on whether it's a club or a select side that has been put together pretty decent, strong talent like Stars.
Say your opinion, man. Be controversial. Have some backbone.
There's a pro and there's an amateur. We're now in year 2. I better be able to not pay attention in the second half. And, that's what NOLA has done with every opponent they've faced so far this preseason, vice the USA South. And USA South is a good opponent. But with the Reds, they've got a pretty good scrum. They've got some good athletes, overall up front. But at the end of the day, the fitness wasn't there. And, NOLA was able to do what they had to do. Like I said, these really shouldn't be close. You really want to just get live competition for your guys so that you can run your systems and get good film and see what you need to do. And, NOLA is one of those teams.
Scouting new players is definitely an underrated aspect of these games as well. I know that Coach Fitzpatrick, here in Houston, definitely take the opportunity to look at the other talent, especially teams like the Reds, where, as you said, their scrum gives people problems. Fitness, notwithstanding, going into the second half.
I think with some of these, you have to be very considerate of who you're playing. The Reds, the Blacks specifically, both are very well coached programs and both attract top athletes. Whereas let's talk about a guy most recently of, say, the Austin Blacks is now playing with AER and Brendan Rams. And Vince Jobo first came to the United States and was playing with the Austin Blacks, things like that. So they're still attracting, top talent. But there's a difference between guys that all train on their own and then have 2 practices a week versus having, full strength programs under a strength coach and then practice close to full time, which is where we're at with, and for anyone who doesn't know, most MLR teams have a much larger full-time training group this season. Some MLR teams are even all full-time training group, but that means they're smaller teams as well. But and New Orleans is one of those teams that has a larger full-time training group. I think it's about 22 guys maybe that train every day. And then, the part-time guys come in the morning to strength train and in the evening for team practice, for full team practice. So, and they've added top college players. They've added some other Eagles, some other international guys, and they've looked like they needed to look this preseason and against the Reds, really. A well-coached club side, but that was still a club side.
Honestly, these games are good just to get a grip on things like especially on things like line speed and how the backs are going to work. Because if the backs are able to move unimpeded, you're going to get a good idea of the kinds of attack formations and the kinds of things that they're going to be looking to do in the starter plays. Obviously, they're going to be facing a lot stiffer competition in MLR, so things are going to play out differently. But it's really good just to get a look at the system and see what NOLA could potentially look like this season. And what I saw was some pretty good fluidity out on their back line in the way they were able to recycle, the ball into the hands of some of their playmakers. And one underrated aspect of that game, though, I just want to give a big shout out to Vince Jobo on making his comeback. As you mentioned, a former player with the Austin Blacks. Vince suffered a horrible Achilles injury last year. And for those that follow him on social media, the dude went absolutely bonkers in terms of his recovery and his physical therapy. It's great to see him back on the field, and I think he's going to be a huge factor, on the field that NOLA just didn't have last year. He's that big play guy who can just out-physical people. You can't bring him down one-on-one. How this injury is going to affect him long-term into the season, it's, only time's going to tell that. But if, being him and like all the adversity that he's had to face coming back from this injury, I think it's going to be pretty positive.
Well, I mean, I'm not a professional athlete. In the Army, you definitely are a professional athlete. Not these days. I'm retired. But, sport orthopedic surgeons, when it comes to athletes, when they know just amateur athletes, that they're very clear on what your back-to-play protocol is. Well, he's a professional athlete, so it's the orthopedics and the physical therapists that he had to deal with, they knew the kind of stress that he needed to put on, his Achilles in rehab. So I think that, it's for the season, I think you're just going to see a guy that is just going to get after it. And I think he's going to have to, the coaches are going to have to, have a leash on him to just monitor his time, because he is an animal. Like that is who Vince Jobo is. So you have to just, you got to keep a leash on him so that he can, move forward.
You got to keep him in bubble wrap until the playoffs. Like, if Nola can make it to the playoffs and then really let that dog off its leash, they're going to be dangerous.
So,
especially one more shout out to JP Eloff, one of the best, fullbacks in the league. Like, goddamn, that guy can fucking move.
So, but into the other game that was broadcast this weekend, and man, talk about grad school hole. For some reason, I thought this was on Saturday and not on Sunday. And I was clicking the link on Saturday at 3 p.m. Mountain Time, and I'm going, hey, why is there like this rebroadcast of a basketball game? What the heck?
You were suffering from rugby madness and probably sleep deprivation and whatever the hell else comes with being in grad school.
Yeah. So San Diego loses at home to Glendale 31-38. Overall pretty competitive. Some great stuff from fly half Joe Pietersen, who was a super late edition last year. He was only there for their playoff game against the Seattle Seawolves. And I got to tell you, you saw the skills at play when he started at fullback for them that day. And you saw the skills again. And you kind of see why they let Ty Gleader and Ben Sema go. I think he's overall an upgrade. But when it comes to, it's not that Ben Sema or Ty Gleader don't have those skills. I think that for the most part, they haven't been in the proper environment to continuously grow. Ty, just to get back to where he was with Connaught, really, he get back to that level. And, he's put in a lot of work. And that's why he was called into USA camp. And that's why I think he's going to be one of the few guys to get a cap during the ARC. But you just see why they went foreign instead of keeping 2 USA eligible, one an Eagle, one about to be an Eagle guys, because, hey, their price is expensive, right? So, and if you can upgrade for cheaper, it is what it is. Devin Short, that kid is an animal. He still has a lot of work to do around the breakdown, but when it comes to what he can do in the open field, whether it's on defense or with the ball in hand, it takes about 6 guys to tackle him. Scrummaging, San Diego. I've kind of said this, and some other people have said this, not echoing, but you examine where the scrummaging was for San Diego last year. It is significantly better, and their scrummaging got much better from week 1 to when they played that game in the playoffs. But a coaching change up front, Scott Murray, Scotland International, former director of rugby for the Santa Monica Dolphins and forwards coach for UCLA, is now the forwards coach down in San Diego. And you just see so much stuff that's different. But it's not just him. They also brought in more top-end talent. Paddy Ryan, the Australian at tight head prop, has come in. They brought in another Australian who's a hooker. And you're just looking at what this stable of front rows is. And they've definitely, I think last year they built this team from back to front. And this year they sort of kept an assortment of the backs that they had, and they did all their additions from front to back, which is kind of how you got to do this. Because, I know some people think scrummaging is, going away, but I think in this competition, scrummaging can still be a weapon and will be a weapon. Looks like they want to use their maul a lot, which they did last year. There are some things to work on that set piece out of the line out. Some of the kicking, they kind of turned the ball over when they kicked from inside their 22. They didn't get the ball with near enough depth. When it comes to Glendale, it looks like they reloaded a little bit, but their losses from last season were significant. Scrummaging needs some work in this one. I'm a fan of Luke White at loosehead prop and not Luke White the lock, if that makes any sense. He can lock. It's not about what he can do at lock, but he's was one of the top loosehead props when he played there last season. Brendan Daly made himself known. He played 6, Hanko at 7. Both found a lot of work. Both were where they needed to be. There you go.
Well, thank you very much for that rundown, Aaron. So, like I said earlier, when we were talking about the Houston game, I had to edit this game for Fitzy's film studies, so I'm kind of almost sick of it at this point. But one of the advantages to that is that I was kind of able to slow the game down and look at different aspects, particularly when choosing,
here's a question, because I was in a law textbook. What was the first yellow card? Because I saw Sean's, but I didn't see the other one.
I didn't either. All I did was, just mark it on as a penalty towards Glendale. I didn't have any audio while watching the game, so that was also kind of difficult. Yeah. So I wasn't able to really get an idea of where that yellow card came from. But however, I was very impressed with the fact that they were able to overcome Sean Davies' second half yellow card, especially playing a man down in what was still a really competitive, close game. So one thing, like we mentioned, or like you mentioned, Aaron, San Diego scrum has definitely been improving, as well as their line speed coming out of the starter plays. However, Glendale, it just didn't seem like they were definitely not as fluid as San Diego. However, while Glendale's big advantage is that you can't bring any of their players down one-on-one. Both of their locks, as you again mentioned, Aaron, they were playing crazy. Both their 4 and 5 spots were able to secure tries in the game. But however, to me, it just seemed like San Diego played a much better game, a much cleaner game in terms of passing as well. Also, the penalties for Glendale are definitely going to be a problem, and they started to be a problem at a few points last year with people losing their tempers, and especially inside the breakdowns where they got kind of undisciplined. Because to my count, Glendale only had 2 or 3 put-ins in the scrum, as well as San Diego was able to keep the ball in their territory with a huge amount of free kicks. So Glendale is definitely going to need to clean up some stuff in terms of discipline if they want to stay in games against some of the other tougher clubs in the league, especially when it gets later in the season and these injuries are going to start piling up as they do every single year. So I would say look for San Diego to be much more improved than they even were last year, especially with these changes to their roster and the reshuffling of people and where they're going. But look for Glendale to maybe even take a step back, though. They definitely added some more pieces. Hanko Hammerscheis can't be underestimated. But again, these are not the same people who have been playing together for 4 or 5 years, as they were last year when they came into the MLR. It's kind of a whole new team, and Coach Williams is going to have to try and work with that. I don't think Glendale is going to be as dominant. Still pretty good, though.
Yeah, I as like what Glendale is going to be. They still did a Glendale, because I'm watching this game.
They won last minute, though. We should really point that out. It was 80 plus.
They did win last minute, but I'm watching this game and I'm not understanding how they're scoring points. Most of the points they scored, that new fullback they have, man, he's good. He is good. So there was a Glendale,
like a 50+ meter try that they're full. Yeah,
there was a Glendale penalty, and San Diego chose to scrum. Smart move, right? And then this is where it got dumb. And you'll remember this.
Oh yeah.
They win their scrum put in, obviously. And then they're bunched up on the near side and they're running down the pitch, sort of, and they're offloading like real quick, but real sloppily. And like this offload was like the slowest offload I've ever seen in my life. The ball was just floating. And that fullback for Glendale just came through and poached that ball and scored a try. I was like, what
do we call that in rugby? Because you can't call it a pick six.
So
try five.
I mean,
by five.
Intercept try. That's what we call it.
Counter try. I got Grant Cole just giving me
counter try
in the back.
Counter try. We need to trademark that and make sure it's.
Nah, dude. Courtney Clinton already got it.
Oh
yeah, we're late on that one, man. He's gonna sue us now. Shit.
So yeah, I mean, so Glendale was able to take on the chaos for the most part, but you just saw the way San Diego was playing, and you're just like, this team is different, and the score shouldn't have been there. But I guess they pulled a New England, right? They just figured it out. But that's that game. Moving on, some funny stuff happened this weekend in another game scheduled.
Yeah, I just want to say, so we're about to talk about the canceled game of Rugby United New York versus the Toronto Arrows, which then became the Toronto Arrows versus the semi-defunct Ontario Arrows, whatever they wanted to call it on social media. But the main point and what I'm trying to say is that a single accident in an island the size of Manhattan somehow forced the guys at Rugby United New York to miss the game. Now, I don't want to say it as if it's a mystery. I know what happened. I know they got stuck on the freeway because of a shitty accident and they were delayed for 4 hours. The fact that they were traveling the day of, is definitely one problem. But I just think it just speaks to the fact that Boston is better, because we probably would have dragged that car off to the side of the road and burnt it rather than let it disrupt our commute. We are hardy people. Darn right.
Oh, man.
Take that, James Kennedy.
Credit to Bill Webb and his crew for bringing the throwback jerseys in some bags so that they could play 23 on 23 in the bubble. Cool. They put on a show for the people of Orchard Park that had come out in Western New York to watch this thing. And most people don't follow this stuff on Twitter and Facebook yet, so people showed up. And this is good thinking, right? This is great stuff by Toronto. People were showing up anyways to watch this thing, and they're like, we got to make something happen. So they made something happen. Utah, they got some live scrimmage action against Life West, which is good. Looks like Maka Tamalau was not re-signed and has returned to the Bay Area and suited up for Life West Gladiators in the scrimmage. So looks like he won't be with the Warriors this season. Look at Reddit from Bobby Boberson, wrote a bunch of stuff about it. There wasn't a score, but it was a lot of tries to 2 tries. This is what went down. They did a training session for people to watch. There were, if you look at the pictures, there are bleachers that go down all one side. Utah says about 1,000 people showed up. And they got to watch some rugby, which is great. And it looks like Micah Hofoka left the scrimmage with a significant injury. Don't really have an update on that, but from what I understand, it was pretty bad. That, to my knowledge, is Utah's only preseason action of going into Major League Rugby. So You have, again, a varying setup of preseason action for different teams. Some teams are playing one game, some teams are playing two, some teams are playing a few club teams and then playing some MLR teams. But we are 2 weeks away. Just some quick, I guess, admin news for Utah. While we were on break, they did announce appointments of their full coaching staff. Stevie Scott, former Scotland U20s head coach, was the Edinburgh head coach at one point, was also their Edinburgh's interim head coach. He's been all over when it comes to Scottish rugby, but he was the forwards coach with Scotland for a while before he moved down to help run Edinburgh and then lead the Scotland U20s. So when it comes to, bringing in more knowledge to coach up our forwards, that's very important. And then James Semple, who was a rugby development coach for the Waikato Chiefs and had also worked for the Scottish Rugby Union a few years ago. So and then they brought in Mark Drown to be the team manager, who is a retired lieutenant colonel who had taken the job as Fiji's manager. But I guess they made it worth his while for Fiji Sevens manager. So you're like, wouldn't you want to go on the series to all these stops? So they must have made it worth his while. I guess so. There you go. Moving on to transactions.
Yeah. So for transactions today, let me see what we have for you fine people. So going back to Rugby United New York, hey guys, John Quayle's coming over from Glendale, a really physical player who, we talked about the losses that Glendale suffered and how significant they may or may not be. And John Quayle is probably going to be among one of those people who can definitely, his absence is going to be felt. Seamu Smith, another center coming into Rugby United New York to add to that already really deep position group that they have. James Rockford, prop, going up to New York as well. That scrum is looking pretty darn strong. Matt Almeida, a prop coming here to Houston. I cannot say enough about this guy. He is built like a damn house of bricks. Grant, how much can this dude bench?
More than you and me and Mikey combined away.
Yeah, 450 plus pounds is the rumor that this kid can actually bench.
Oh no, ask how much you can squat.
Skip, squatting is a whole nother story, but also very high character. I haven't heard a bad word about anybody come out of this guy's mouth. I'm really excited about him.
I'm more excited about his hair.
Yeah, I know. Everybody's excited about the hair, man.
I mean, the hair's the good stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh dude, I've seen it in braids. I've seen it kind of like let out as well. Like, I think we're gonna see a few different hairstyles from this dude. Coming into this season. Another dude coming into Houston, Jason Harris, right? Another person that people are really excited about. He's going to be coming in at hooker. He's going to be competing with Pat O'Toole, although nobody is really expecting Pat O'Toole to be challenged for the starting position. But
Jason Harris, right, beat Pat O'Toole out at Kind.
Oh, come on, man. But here's the thing. It's definitely going to be a good competition. Fitzy's really excited about the depth that he has at hooker. He loves his scrum porn, and this is just more that he's putting on the internet history, so to say.
Jason Harris Wright went to Bristol to play in the championship, and Pat O'Toole graduated from the Connaught Senior Academy, and for some reason decided to not stay with Connaught and go to San Diego. I know why. Because he wanted to get capped by the United States. Apparently playing rugby for the United States is becoming an in-demand thing.
I mean, who doesn't want to live in the States, especially after living in a shitty place like frickin' England? I've been to Ireland a few times. It's beautiful, but I wouldn't want to live there full time.
It reminds me of Seattle, the amount of rain that they get.
But one last transaction for y'all. Brendan Daly going to Glendale. He's a really versatile back row player. You can stick him in either at center or in at wing. He has that versatility to make plays all over the field. I think that's it from my transactions. And Grant's little quips in there and his opinions. So, Aaron, who do you got?
So for the Sabercats, Matthew Fa'augali. Oh man, I butchered that. He's a back row flanker. He was released. He requested his release, and he's returned to Australia. So fair winds, my friend. Penny Tagive, center, Austin, elite. So this is a guy who left playing professional rugby league to come to the United States and play American football. Then somehow ended up in our sevens program. Oh yeah, and talking a first choice athlete in the centers. So that's really good to see there. Marcelo Torrealba, scrum half from Chile. I need to find out his number. ESPN doesn't know, but he's a Condore for Chile for both. He's captained both sevens and 15s. To back up Mikhail Romero for Austin. Make sure that battle happens. Then Matteo Sanguinetti, prop Houston. He is also Intero for Uruguay. And then Marco Fepulei, tight head prop for Glendale, who was in Auckland Minor 10 squad last year. So, there have been some questions about the prop depth at Glendale, where they're bringing this guy in, and they're bringing in another guy, as I understand it, but I don't have a name for you, so we're not gonna put that out there. But I guess I'm gonna have some interesting commentary following our latest news piece. Good to see transactions done. We're 2 weeks away, and there's still some guys that are going to get added because their visas will finally get approved, and we'll be able to do some good stuff. But this government shutdown needs to end because I need my GI benefits to get approved so I can pay for school. Okay, is that a problem?
Dude, don't even get me fucking started. We've got to keep politics out of rugby because I will.
Oh, that's all I'm saying. Just end the shutdown so I can pay for school. That's my commentary about that. So the United States of America Rugby Football Union has signed a deal with Canterbury, North America. And the reason why I say North America and not Canterbury in general is that this has not been publicized at all by parent company of Canterbury North America. They said for many years to come, it's going to be a great partnership. Important to note, what are the economics of this deal? It's not publicized by the parent company. The economics of the Adidas deal weren't good. They weren't. They only provided a certain dollar value of Vic, and they didn't have us by the nose, but the effect was they had us by the nose in that BLK went bankrupt, and we needed somebody to be our kid sponsor. But if you look at the BLK deal, we outstripped our value in kind dollar value. When you look at the tax documents, some hill I don't need to die on today. But in previous years, the economics of these deals haven't been good enough to deal with what we need. But now let's get into brand reach, and this is the important piece. Canterbury is an unknown brand. There are 120,000 members of USA Rugby. So do 120,000 people even know? Those 120,000 people, do they even know Canterbury? Not all of them. I would say most of them don't even know. It's a very small brand. I know a lot of colleges are signing, provider deals, buying a lot of Canterbury stuff. VMI, my college, they get their kit through Canterbury. But at the end of the day, it's an extremely small and single sport specific brand when you compare it even to an apparel giant in Europe that no one knows about here called Macron.
Isn't Macron the president of France?
Yeah, they're not related, even though they have the same it's the same last name. I thought that
Macron,
was
sorry.
yeah.
Macron.
I definitely looked that one up actually because I was like, huh. But so Macron's a huge apparel brand in Europe. But so what do we need? Like we don't even need really cash value. We need a good deal Vic wise from a major brand in the North American market, but also includes integration into their marketing campaign to push a brand notoriety is much more important than a few extra dollars, which is probably what this deal is going to get us. Under Armour was at the table a couple of years ago, and we couldn't sell them rugby, even though they wanted to be sold rugby, because at the time they sponsored Canada, they sponsored Wales, and they also sponsored Georgia at the time, and they sponsored more than a few other clubs that Under Armour USA wanted to be sold on rugby, and we couldn't get it done. But I think we've fixed the salesman problem right now. But when it comes to a partner, Nike makes Argentina's kit. Whether it's Under Armour or Nike, if we could get ourselves integrated into their marketing campaign so that they see our products, see our brand, that's extremely important, because then it's recognizable to the people at large, because we're trying to grow the sport as a consumer base, as a participant base, and I don't think this deal does that. That's my opinion.
No, and that definitely makes a lot of sense. But I can definitely see why Canterbury might be wanting to invest in USA Rugby, because it's a growing brand. We are getting bigger and bigger, especially with the emergence of the MLR. So perhaps this deal is sort of them trying to coincide with that rise and trying to build their brand. But like you said, it's all about brand recognition and bringing in people, in here in the USA market. Because they're going to recognize brands like Under Armour, like Adidas, like Nike, like you said, they're not going to recognize Canterbury. So it might be some subliminal shit when it comes to like who's making the kits, but subliminal is important when it comes to.
So there's a brand that's huge in the U.S. market. That's pretty huge. Like they're not a Nike, they're not an Adidas, they're not an Under Armour, but you know this
Puma.
brand. Yeah, Puma, they make stuff. They sponsor the Blue Bulls. They make stuff down. But here, there's a brand that you know that is in almost every sport in America.
To be honest, though, the only thing I've ever seen Puma make prominently is ankle socks that are worn by middle schoolers, man.
But I'm not talking specifically about Puma. There's a brand that is in almost every single sport in North America. It's not Nike. I mean, like Nike's in everything, but it's not a Nike. It's not an Adidas, and it's not an Under Armour. ASICS. And they are a rugby brand. They are.
I didn't even think about them, honestly.
They sponsor South Africa and they sponsor Australia. Maybe ASICS wants to crack into another sport in North America. Maybe we should have tried selling them, we are on the rise.
Unless we've already tried selling them, because honestly, these negotiations are so backdoor and under the table, especially in USA Rugby, which releases jack shit for information about anything. So for all we know, that we tried to sell them on rugby, but who knows?
Maybe. I'm just looking at brands with reach in the United States market, and we're struggling right now. So that's my commentary. I'm glad everyone agrees with what I had to say. Not really. If you think I'm full of it, you can even tweet me at the Strobro. You can. I'm findable. So yeah. But
yeah, we're no strangers here to dissenting opinion on Earful of Dirt.
Questions from Bob. I think Liam and I may have two different answers, or we may have the same answer. I don't know. From Life Love Rugby, who thus far has the better academy setup? Thus, Wow,
So
thus far twice. Is there a time limit as to when the clubs need to have academies up and running? Question mark. Liam.
So before the broadcast started, we did talk about this, and there was three clubs that kind of got thrown around in terms of who were the best. Obviously, I have my own opinions about Houston, just because I've seen the work up close that they have been doing, particularly with the West Houston Lions, which is a D1, D2, and D4 club that has been sort of facilitating the development of some of the lower tier players in the Sabercats Academy. The guy behind me, Grant Cole, has been doing a great job of managing that. The only issue is just I've seen like a lack of integration of college players. There's been more of a focus on bringing in foreign players and players from out of state. These are really great athletes. However, like there is a point that you're not exactly developing the local talent. Then we kind of have the New Orleans Gold. They have a great U20s program right now that's kind of been on a winning streak. And it's paid off. We've already talked about the access that they have to strength and conditioning training, and I think that's going to, that's going to be beneficial in terms of getting the fitness up. Because one thing that you hear coaches from overseas saying all the time is that the lack of fitness here in the United States is going to be a huge issue. And then finally, there's Glendale. You can't really argue with the productivity of the Glendale Raptors Academy, especially when you see people like Mika Kruse and Harley Davidson coming out and fucking tearing it up in their rookie season.
Harley Davidson was developed in life.
Yeah.
He's not an academy player.
But back up to Mika Kruse.
Well, it wasn't just Mika Kruse. Mickey Bateman, Jake Chrisman, who now is playing with Utah.
A really good scrum half. Still a little raw in a lot of ways, but however, definitely a huge ceiling. But you can't deny that this Glendale Academy has been established for years now. You have Coach Williams, who's a really good coach at the very top, and it goes down like that with his influence. I think Glendale's the most productive. However, I see NOLA and Houston's academy systems as having high ceilings, maybe not as high as Glendale with the structure they already have in place, but definitely on the rise. But I think you're going to talk about another club that I didn't mention.
Yeah. So, like who has the better? I would say when it comes to best right now, whether it was Glendale's big side last year or their small side now, they have quickly identified talent that has gone on and filled holes in their lineup and pushed, not only filled holes, but pushed guys out, right? Like that's what happened last year. They had a center wing, and then Mika Kruse took his job, things like that. So you're seeing what Glendale is doing there. Glendale also has a youth program, but I think it's going to be a little – they haven't done a lot at the U18 level, which is what we've seen from NOLA Gold, which I really like. They've done very successfully there. But the program that – if I take everything by this press release as sacrosanct, the pathway that has been hammered out by the Utah Warriors, if they get everything done, man, it's going to look good. They announced that over the break, and it was so you have the Junior Warriors program, which any kid can sign up for who's playing rugby and just go in for extra skills, right? At the U16 and U18 level, they're going to hold combine. So that's like boys and girls can come in, and it doesn't matter. They're going to hold skill sessions and upskill kids, which is great. Then you have with Rugby Utah, Utah Youth Rugby, because Rugby Utah is the senior SRO. With Utah Youth Rugby, they've established that the Warriors are going to have two sides of 20 players apiece, U16 and U18 level, that are selected from multiple combines, and they will assemble in February, and they will stay as a player group through the rest of the year. Which is great. And then you have integration of the collegiate programs, and you look at the collegiate programs at in Utah, you've got some really hardcore college programs in BYU, Utah, and Utah Valley. you get them integrated to form a sub academy. That's pretty awesome. And then you have from Rugby Utah, you have the men's premier division coalesced under the Utah Warriors, and you're going to have the Warriors Selects program on top of that. And the Warriors Selects program is, I would say, is sort of had its birth from a couple of years ago. And that was the Utah Selects program. So you have all these guys playing in the men's premier division of Rugby Utah that will be they're putting up their hands for the select side. And if you make the select side, you will train on a regular basis with the Utah Warriors. And then you're going to play fixtures, and you're going to get contract offers. So as a holistic program, if that thing is up and running this year, which it sounds like it's going to be, that's pretty good. Like that's more than, we've ever had in this country when it comes to development of rugby players. But
again, this, when it comes to stuff that's already in place, like Houston and NOLA are building up their academy system, and they I can say for a fact that Matt Truville had the head of the Houston academy system. He has a great pathway on paper, and he's done just as good a job as he possibly can in implementing it. However, there's going to be hiccups and there's going to be bumps in the road, just as with any well-laid plan. So it's hard to take a plan that's only on paper at the moment, and it's not a mechanical working reality, at face value. So definitely it sounds good. This is a great blueprint, and, it's definitely the way to go. However, I'm going to be interested in terms of finances. I'm going to be interested in terms of logistics with venues and, fields to practice on. So
logistics, Utah is a big state, but it is not Texas. I would say
it's not that populated.
The majority, so it's around 5-6 million people, and 2/3. Maybe I'm smoking. It might be bigger. Let's look this up. Let's look at the stats.
We have
so Utah is, the whole population is like Houston's population, but 3.1 million people. Around 2 million of those people, though, live in the Provo, Salt Lake City corridor, which is basically, from one end to the other of the Houston Metroplex, truly, right? So when it comes to people being able to form up and the economics of that, the majority of the people that are selected will be able to attend training and all that stuff pretty regularly. I'm guessing pretty much the Warriors Selects, not really like the West Houston Lions per se, but these guys are they're competing for a contract. They're not contracted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. But like I said, it's all going to be how the logistics, how they play out, man. Houston is the size of Rhode Island, by the way. I did not fucking know that when I came down here. Crazy.
Houston is massive.
Yeah, dude, straight up. I still don't know what the hell, certain towns around the city, whether or not they're part of Houston or whether or not they're separate towns. Is Katy part of fucking Houston? I don't know.
Well, Katy is Katy, but it is Houston.
Yeah, see, everybody's been saying that, and that doesn't mean anything to me. I'm just
go back to Taunton.
Taunton, nah, man. I have teammates from Taunton, man. Ricken, they're holding it down for the Hornets already.
So the other part of the question is from Life Love Rugby is there a time limit on when clubs need to have these academies up and running? I'm sure there is, but when that is, I have no idea. Whenever that date is, I'm sure everyone's gonna have their academies running very smoothly and like well-oiled ships. So, Sky Bailey, as Victor says, but Ski, your question. Will the academy system focus on high school development, essentially competing with groups such as ERA, or go to the Glendale route and focus on collegiate age players?
Well, I can say that right now the West Houston Lions have done a pretty good job of integrating the local high schools. We have Grant. What is it now? 2 high school teams with the West Houston Lions.
JV and varsity.
We have a JV and varsity high school program. Like I've already said, the collegiate outreach hasn't been as strong, but I'm very confident in terms of how we're actually reaching out into the public schools and private schools, whatever. We have players from the Sabercats who are coaching these teams too. Such as Connor Murphy and Jack Jack Riley. Sorry, couldn't even blend. Such a good guy. But yeah, no, I'm loving the Houston High School Development Program as well as NOLA. We've already seen that they have a U20 and U18s.
When you look at this, are they going to be competing with Adams? Are they going to be competing with ERA? The answer is yes and no. ERA, like all these other academies, these are like sort of traveling academies, and they aren't all the time. I'm sure West Houston, or like kids in this, there are guys that were in the Sabercats Academy U18, U19 last year in the summer who are also doing ERA stuff. So yes, are they competing? But they're also adding to. But yeah, there's a distinct focus on high school kids. RUNY is going to have a distinct focus on their high school team. They've already done a bunch of player clinics and combines for high school, and they've announced to their under 20s head coaches, and that is forgot to mention that Bill Torigno. He's up at West Point as an assistant there. So there you go. But yeah, they're going to compete against, but they're also going to add to, and those guys that will still go on ERA tours, because guess what? You still need to play rugby. And it is what it is. We just all the academies are really here to the MLR academies here are really here to grow participation in the sport at the youth level locally. And ERA I don't know. I would say ERA is a great organization. They coach coaches, they coach players, but at the end of the day, you only have so many resources, and they're focused really on existing players. And I think these academy programs that will be the junior academy programs, U18, U16, and U14 are going to be mostly focused on really getting new kids into the game and then selecting down to the travel squads that will go all over the place for tours and stuff. But yeah.
Wow. Is that it?
Is it that time?
It is 7:57.
Okay, so we're going to keep it tight in the preseason. So next week we'll keep it pretty tight. When there's 4 games a week, it might be kind of hard, everyone. But I know you guys love rugby, so I'll try to get you a 90-minute pod every week during the season so that you can run to it instead of just listening to it on the car.
So for my closing thoughts, I want to give a special shout out to our co-host from last year and our Spanish host of En La Mele, the Spanish language version of this podcast, Victor Perez, who just had his first ever daughter today. What's her name? Mariana? I believe it is.
Mariana.
So welcome to the club, Mariana. Your dad is a really cool person, and he's a great colleague, and you're going to be a great rugby player in just a few short years. Oh, and go Pats, baby!
You've got
the AFC Championship.
He's got we've got an under ones team, sponsored by Earful of Dirt.
They just crawl around with the ball,
So I think that's it, Josh. So
you want to take us away?
All right. Well, that's our.
You got a thought?
Got some enthusiasm.
No. I don't have any thoughts. I'm just here to be the guy in the background.
He's the puppet master, just pulling the strings.
I thought. Well, since I am Corey this week, yeah, technically.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right. So that's our show for the night. Be sure to tune in next week. We're live every Monday, available and available on your favorite podcast platforms every Wednesday. If you like what we do, please subscribe to our YouTube and iTunes feeds. It helps other folks find us. And be sure to share your own news, views, and abuse with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Earful of Dirt on all of those. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.